the continuing to grow this?
No, I think you're doing a great job with it, man. You've been very active. I've noticed it.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Comics for All. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday afternoon. Today is Wednesday, February 18th of 2026. My name is Jameson. I am your host here at Comics for All, where comics, creativity, and community all connect. As part of our weekly Ink and Insight segment, we have the awesome Chris Stevens from Lighthouse joining us. Chris, thank you so much again for coming on your second time now on the channel.
Oh, thanks, man. I feel at home.
Right? Exactly. You feel just two guys talking comics. So, uh,
100%.
exactly. Yeah. And then the channel obviously has grown since last time you're on. But again, if you can remind folks kind of what hooked you into comics as a reader, as a young person.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I think like a lot of kids, especially of my generation, you would go to gas stations and convenience stores and
Hmm.
those stores and those that was back in the day when your parents would send you out to get their cigarettes and stuff like that. So tobacco stores carried comics and Conan magazines, and I just was attracted to it at a very young age. Spider-Man was a real big thing when I was a little kid, and loved climbing up the walls. And I mean, we all did, right? So yeah, and from there I just got into it. Like, something about it struck me, and I think I started taking it fairly seriously, at a pretty young age, trying to figure out just what worked and what didn't. It was always sort of fascinating to me.
Yeah. And that's, I think a lot of people kind of happen into it in that way. Uh, my next question is actually a good one is when did you have the realization for yourself that, I actually want to create and be part of the comics community? When did you have that for yourself?
Well, and I'm sure this is with a lot of people, and maybe it's good for people to hear this. Uh, I had that realization when I was like 12,
Awesome.
yeah, and it's something that in my early, after high school, so late teens, early 20s, it's something that, in my mind I was doing, but all I was really doing was writing stories and notebooks and,
Hmm.
if I met a local guy who drew stick figures, like, oh, you want to make a comic, so I wasn't taking it all that seriously. I think by my late 20s, I realized that it was, do or die, so to speak, in terms of like, I didn't want to get to be the age I am now and not have given it, a real try. So,
Hmm.
but it was a thing early on that I didn't think I would wind up doing too many things. I thought I would, and I just didn't. I started to pursue it seriously in my late 20s.
Excellent. There's never a wrong time to get into comics, I should say.
No, any vocation, any vocation that you're interested in, whether it's comics or whatever it might be, whatever it is, it's never too late for anything. It's never too late till it's too late. So you might as
That's
well,
right.
yeah, might as well just keep on pushing.
And before you got on the air, we were chatting a little bit, but have you had a chance to read anything since the last time you were on that's stuck with you?
Yeah, yeah. Let me think. Well, I know it's about newer stuff, but one thing that, and I'm gonna mangle the guy's name, but I just, I'm the days are hectic right now with comics work, and sometimes just to unplug at night, I'll just, I've got some comic shops near me, but comic shops aren't open at random hours at 10 at night or something. So I'll just go on eBay and grab random stuff that pops into my head, and I randomly grabbed a run of King Conan, which
Ooh, nice.
right around the time I picked these issues up, it becomes Conan the King. But the King Conan comic from like the mid '80s, early '80s, and we're all familiar with Conan. And that was like, I was a little kid when that had been coming out, and I saw it on the shelves, but I never bought it. I didn't have an interest in it. And I guess historically, Mark Silvestri is the artist of most of it.
Nice.
Before he goes on to become sort of the Mark Silvestri who does the X-Men, and then part of the Image founding. fathers. But the interesting thing about it, the reason I'm bringing it up though, Silvestri's good. Sure, it's nice to look at. But the writer, and I'm going to mangle his last name, Alan Zelenitz or Alan Zelenitz, something like Alan Zelenitz.
Mm-hmm.
Very sophisticated, very sophisticated scripting for the mid '80s. Not many people like very good. Leans a little bit, I guess, towards the Shakespearean, maybe more than your average Conan should or
Okay.
does, you know. But um, that's something that's funny. That sort of stuck in my head. And then you know what I read that was new to me and isn't super new, but Daniel Warren Johnson's Wonder Woman Black Label book. I think it's called Dead Earth.
Yes, I have read that. How did you like it?
Well, it's interesting, and it's very interesting. I've been trying to get more since the last time we talked a few months ago. I've really gotten deeper into like you get to a certain point and your interests sort of are fixed and settled and you have a generational bias. And when you're busy, it's easy, it's a timeless tale. It wouldn't just be me. I would read interviews with guys who are my age now when I was 25 and go, how can't Frank Miller know about Darwin Cook? Stuff like that. It's easy
Mm-hmm.
not to like stay super connected. So in the last 6 months, a lot through the prodding of Kurt Piers, who I'm working with on a bunch of his books, I've gotten a lot more connected or sort of reconnected to like the current scene and the weekly stuff. And
Excellent.
in doing so, I realize Daniel Warren Johnson's place in this generation's in their hearts, and I wanted to understand it better because it's not something that instantly clicked for me.
Right.
I totally see a very skilled guy, and I see cool art, but I didn't quite get it. And as I started working with more younger people in the last year and talking to different younger people, like 30 and under, the reverence for him is, I know that from other folks from previous times, right? Whether it was
Mm-hmm.
or my era or let's say the 90s when, my high school era, let's say, and then, the last 20 years, every generation has that sort of guy. And he seems to be it for the moment. And it was something I really wanted to understand. And the Wonder Woman book helped me understand it. So that was one that I know it's like probably 5 years old, but that's sticking in my memory right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really good though. If you haven't read it.
Oh, I did read it. Yeah, I said this to a couple people. He has a very rare sense of immediacy. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just not something that many creators are able to, it's a rare thing. And he's got a very powerful sense of immediacy that he's able to get onto the page in certain moments.
Yes.
For me, that would be the big appeal. So yeah, no, that and the old Conan books. Those are the two that are sticking in my head right now. Yeah.
Fantastic. I want to go find that run of Conan now, especially because it's probably in a collected edition at this point. So.
It must be. Yeah, there was the where it starts for me is issue 20, and I bought it because the cover is it's like a run of Michael Kaluta covers that are really beautiful. And I
Mm-hmm.
think mostly forgotten. I guess the hardcore collectors, it's probably a big thing in those circles, but even in fandom, I don't hear them talked about often, but really beautiful. Some of the reproduction isn't great, I guess, just because of the technology of the time, but they're still really beautiful to look at. And the one is the one that I bought the run of. It starts and it says the prince is dead, and it's very graphically, just very nicely done. So yeah, definitely check them out.
Going to for sure. So like as we mentioned before we even got on the air, we were chatting about kind of what you've been working on. So for the viewers out there, can you share kind of what your creative work week is looking like for the next month or two here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's mostly working on the Stephen R. Bissett Tyrant Kickstarter that will be going live in within the space of a few weeks. And we announced it back in late November.
I
And
put that in the chat for the viewers out there.
sweet, thank you. And yeah, Jim Rugg is designing the books and the what we would call the program. Just meaning all the rewards and different items that we're gonna offer once we go live. And yeah, Tyrant is the life story of a T-Rex from gestation, literally from, the mother giving birth and right before she gives birth. And it takes you a bit into the T-Rex's life. And Steve had planned it when Steve created it back in the mid 90s. He was, already the Stephen Bissett who had co-created Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
a large part of it, certainly the beginning of it. He was the Steve Bissett who had been the publisher of Taboo, which is where Lost Girls and From Hell sort of famously got their beginning before, going off to other publishers and formats.
Right.
There it is. There's a Blacklight. There's one of the items we will be offering. The art might not be final there, but that's Blacklight
Gorgeous,
poster.
regardless.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's designed by Jim Rugg, and Jim had great success. I think creatively and successful in terms of the campaign when he did his Octobriana 1976 a few years back. So some of this stuff is I love to take a lot of credit, but some of it's pretty simple to put two and two together, right? So yeah, we're gonna have a set of Blacklight posters. People will be able to choose individual posters or purchase a set at a price point that's a little nicer for them. And yeah, it's just going to be a lot of Tyrant. We're promoting it pretty heavily with folks like yourself who are so gracious to make the time for us.
Of course.
It's going to be a heavy round of promotion between Steve, Jim, and myself. I know Steve and me are doing two of these tomorrow, just to give you
Mm-hmm.
a sense of, yeah. So, and we're still designing some of the books. There's going to be two books, an original art edition, which everyone can think of as the very familiar artist edition format, where the original art is reproduced as close as you're ever going to get to owning the original art, basically
Yeah.
reproduced at the same size. And you see all the you see Steve's hands sort of moving across the pages, so to speak, when you're working in this format. And there's that, and then the complete edition, which we're, believe me, we mean it. That's when you ask me what the bulk of my work is.
Here you go.
I have a lot of freelance work, but the Tyrant stuff is getting the complete edition, completely organized and making sure we live up to that name.
Absolutely. And as a potential reader and a lot of the readers out there, that's the market. That's definitely what it is now. It's that collected edition, getting everything together. And that kind of leads naturally into my next question is, how did Lighthouse get involved with bringing Tyrant back in these kind of deluxe collected editions?
Yeah, well, I about 10 years ago, or I guess now it's 10, 12 years ago, I had published a book called Little Nemo Dream Another Dream. And that book involved over 100 artists paying tribute to the very famous Winsor McCay's Little Nemo in Slumberland. And
Nice.
Steve was one of the artists who contributed a page to that book.
Okay.
Jim Rugg, who I had known, almost 10 years, or probably about 10 years before the Nemo book. I had met Jim Rugg through my friend Farrell Dalrymple back when Jim was still doing the original Street Angel single issues and self-publishing those, or maybe it was Slave Labor. It's a long time ago, but it wasn't the Street Angel. It was years before the Image Street Angel. And Jim was in the Little Nemo book as well, and Jim designed the Little Nemo book. And early on in the process, he said to me, "Hey, did you know Steve Bissett did a Nemo page already? Like, just did it, had nothing to do with what we were doing." And I said, "No." And he said, "Would you want that in the book? Do you like Steve Bissett?" And like, little did Jim know that Bissett was, honestly, and I've told the story a lot, and I'm sure I'll keep saying it, but like, Steve's a name that I'm just the right age and had the right interest, where Steve is a name I've known since I was 8 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
like, someone who I thought of in like a serious way, probably since I was 10, because the famous Swamp Thing story, The Anatomy Lesson, which it's very famous story. And it's oddly enough, it's certainly not Steve's first Swamp Thing. He did Swamp Things before Alan Moore started.
Right.
And Alan Moore's first Swamp Thing is actually the issue before the Anatomy Lesson. But 20 issue Swamp Thing 21, the Anatomy Lesson, always gets sort of thought of as, and still holds a place for most people, as this, it certainly pushed horror comics forward and the language of comics. And that was a great alchemy that Alan Moore gets, an enormous amount of credit for, and rightfully so. But those books wouldn't exist, and I don't think Moore would have probably been able to go on and do the unique things he did with other artists in Swamp Thing if Steve and John Totleben inking Steve hadn't been there, sort of laying that work.
Right.
So yeah, no, like there's a deep Jim knows Tyrant since he was Jim's a few years younger than me, so Jim would have been in high school when Tyrant was coming out, and Jim's going to the comic store and getting it off the shelf and deciding that he wants to be a cartoonist for his career. And here's this Steve Bissette guy who he's not doing the superheroes, he's not working for any company, he's writing,
Right.
drawing, lettering, publishing, print, the whole damn thing is himself, right? So Jim's deeply inspired by that in his teen years. And so for us, it just goes, it's a confluence of great events where I knew Steve through Jim's introduction and the Little Nemo book. And then in like 2019 or 2020, somewhere in there, when the first Golem of Venice Beach was made, I invited Steve, the Golem creator. He wanted Steve to be in that book, and we were lucky to get Steve to do a couple pages for it when he wasn't really doing many new comics pages for a while. So that kept the connection going, and we had a good relationship. And cartoonist kayfabe, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and know that Jim was, a co-founder and co-host of. They did a fairly, famous episode on Tyrant that I think if you're like, let's say 35 and under, might be the only way what Tyrant is, and it inspires a lot of people. I'm hearing it. If not every day, I'm hearing it every couple days. I get these, I get messages or whatnot, talk to someone involved in some connection. And the cartoonist kayfabe video on Tyrant was it hit a lot of people and made an impression. So Steve had seen that, and I had been asking Steve, I wanted to do Tyrant for and then in the back of my mind, it wasn't going to be Lighthouse. It wasn't going to be like me publishing Tyrant. I would do what I do for people when they hire me. I would put a book together and try to bring it to the best, publisher. That doesn't always work out, but with Steve, it's like you have a lot to work with, right? Like, so I had high hopes that whatever, Image, Dark Horse, whoever, right? Like Abrams, it wouldn't matter, whatever the publisher could be, but it really turns, just turns into Lighthouse along the way, where Steve's older and has done this. Jim's used to a certain amount of independence. I'm used to a certain amount of independence, and publishing world's pretty chaotic right now. And
Yes.
it seemed like a great opportunity to I'm not getting any younger, and you got to do what you're going to do. So it just seemed like a great opportunity to, I've done it once years ago, and I'm in a different phase in my life now, and I'd like to think I could do it a lot better. So it'll be interesting to see, and to get to start off with Steve's Tyrant is, what else could you ask for? So.
No kidding. I mean, what a really cool kind of, like you said, a confluence of events for this to happen. And this is kind of a more of a personal reading question. When, like you said, Tyrant came out in the 90s, in single issues or in smaller collected forms. What grabbed you?
No, sorry, buddy. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for the audience who wouldn't know, it just came out. The only way Tyrant ever came out was as 4 black and white single issues that Steve self-published through his Spider Baby Graphics publishing house. And he did do these things called paleo packs, where, again, black and white collected with a very I thought I had one sitting around, but they're very rare now. I think I've got the last 2 existing ones, and we're going to give them away or offer them in the campaign. But it's never been a trade or a hardcover. Like, that's never happened, So I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to. It's a tricky one with the 30 years in between, so I just wanted to explain that.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But my question was, as a reader and an editor, kind of what, if you want to answer both, like kind of what grabbed you originally when you read it back in the day as a reader, and now what grabbed you when you're like, wow, I wanted to get my editing, hands on this.
Yeah. Well, what grabbed me back in the day, I can answer easily, is Steve. At that point, Tyrant starts coming out in '94, and in 1994 I'm 19, 20 years old, and I was already deeply into this stuff. In my mind, as deep as somebody could be.
Hmm.
At that point for 10 years, and Steve was a very holy name to me. There weren't many names that had the weight of Stephen R. Bissett to me. He was Swamp Thing with Alan Moore, and he was the Taboo publisher. And I
Hmm.
I understood then, that had a lot of weight to me. So at the period of like my sort of post high school time, which this timeline syncs up with, and you get a little older and whatever, you get more whatever idealistic thoughts you have. There was a minute where comics weren't appealing to me quite as much, and I was still getting them, and I was getting the Sandman every month when it came out, but I wasn't as I don't know, I just wasn't as deeply into it. But then there was a period very quickly where around the same time, uh, Paul Pope with a couple earlier novels, like graphic novels, but with THB, with Paul Pope's THB, and Jeff Smith's Bone, and
Hmm.
David Mack's Kabuki, and then Steve with Tyrant. That was, that's that was a really phenomenal thing for me. That had a huge impact, and it was, in particular, Pope with THB. It was just like, oh wow, like you could be a poet and do this, like it was just more appealing to me as I was getting older, and um, there was just something very appealing. And then with Kabuki and Bone, they were sort of genre stories, and these guys were
Yes.
they were doing it on their own. But with Steve, the big difference is that those guys were all just getting started, even though Jeff Smith's a little bit older than Pope and Mac, and Mac's a little bit older or Pope's a little bit older than Mac. They were still all pretty much getting started. Whereas when Steve was doing Tyrant, Steve had already helped push comics forward through his mainstream work with Swamp Thing, and then independently with Taboo. So my perception of Tyrant was much different. It was getting the work of a man who I knew had already been heavily involved with Alan Moore, with Frank Miller, with eventually Grant Morrison and Gaiman and Dave McKean and people like this. Sienkiewicz, certainly Bill
Oh
Sienkiewicz,
yeah.
involved in helping push mainstream comics, and then as a result, the rest, open up more outshoots of comics through broadening, and pushing mainstream comics forward. Um, Outside of Miller, Steve was the only guy who really was doing something like what he was doing in Tyrant, which was writing and drawing his own thing. And beyond Miller, Steve was publishing it himself. So it might not have hit me the same way it hit Jim Rugg, where Jim is a writer, artist, and sort of in control of his fate, so to speak, as a comic creator. Since Jim is an awesome artist, designer, writer, he can, right? Jim instantly, probably, like I said, when he was 14, 15, thought, oh, this
It
is
makes sense.
a career guideline. Whereas for me, it was more of a like a historical thing, like in a historical sense. Tyrant hit me as like, oh wow, like this guy who did this stuff. I knew enough then to realize Steve would have only been in his 20s when he did Swamp Thing. And I was like, oh wow, like this mature man. Back then, a 40-year-old man to me ancient, right? So like it was like, oh, this mature man at the height of his powers, and he's doing this really crazy in the sense of it certainly wasn't a commercial idea to do a book with no characters, meaning no humans, and no,
Yeah.
none of the typical dramatic bullshit that you get. And I love all that stuff, but it wasn't Jurassic Park. It wasn't meant to be, it was meant to be a fairly realistic life story of a dinosaur, good and bad. He intended for you to see the dinosaur die after, after getting attached to it for 10 years or whatever, right? So yeah, it was just for as special a time as that was, and you kind of have to, you could get your head into it historically, I know, but for me, I was just, again, some of this stuff is just the age you are when you experience the things. And for me,
Yes.
I'd already thought very seriously about Steve and Steve's place in comics, and it had developed over the course of, the thoughts of a 10-year-old up until when I see Tyrant and I'm 20 or 19 or whatever. Yeah, it was a very it always hit me like, this is Stephen Bissett's book. And that was a very special thing. very, very special thing, and it stayed in my mind for years. Just stayed in my mind till we get to this point, you know.
And that really encapsulates kind of everything that really goes into my next question, so that was really great of you. How do you, approach kind of this, like you are mentioning, Bassett's legendary, vision and doing something really unique in that time period, but also still really unique in the comics realm period, but also trying to take that and put it in a collected edition for more of a modern audience and format. How do you kind of balance those two things?
You get Jim Rugg.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you work with someone who is, at the top of their field, and happens to be incredibly sympathetic to the material. Jim has said in multiple podcasts, I don't know like how many of them have aired yet or were live. I know a couple were live, but I know Jim said a few times where, and he said it to me. I like have the text message. I'll probably screenshot it and put it in the complete edition or something. Uh, Jim almost cried when he got the scans of the original artwork, which were treated in these special manners with the help of Living the Lines publisher Sean Michael Robinson, who is pretty widely acknowledged as the leading expert on line art reproduction and sort of getting the most out of the original art and the scans.
Yeah.
So Sean created. This is a little bit beyond me. I'm not the tech guy, but Sean created some programs that that sort of when the art was scanned in specific ways, and then Jim has sort of digitally handled every single page by hand, so to speak, and
Okay.
even taken it further. And
That's
Jim said
great.
he cried when he actually got the scans and saw everything. He said he almost cried. So yeah, I think you know we live right now in an era of almost I mean certainly unprecedented wealth of ultra premium books
Oh
and
yeah.
great book design. I mean, there's a ton of shitty book design, but there's a lot of great book design and just a lot of hard covers and slipcases. And what was special 15 years ago is sort of commonplace now. So I think, we're being pretty selective in the items we're going to be offering and the formats of the books, and more than anything, the quality of the materials we use.
Oh yeah.
It came up in a podcast the other day where they asked about the paper stock for the artist edition, and I don't have the technical name handy to me or in my memory right now, but we're using an uncoated bamboo stock for the art
Mm,
edition, which will be, and it's not like it hasn't been done before, but the point is you figure out what's the best, way of doing these things, and you do them and see if you can push them, hopefully a little bit further. So
yeah.
yeah, I think with Jim designing the books and like I said, designing the items in the entire program, um, I think we're gonna be very yeah, when you see that, I mean
Just
that's
like, man.
yeah, it doesn't feel, I mean, in some ways maybe it feels exactly like the 90s, right? Or the 70s would be more appropriate. But
Hmm.
yeah, no, it's just super modern. And yeah, no, I mean we listen, we love Steve so much and love these books that we if anything, we probably will drive ourselves nuts with the final design choices to just try to perfect everything before we would ever just say, oh, here you go, here's the 4 issues collected and give us some money, so
Yeah,
yeah, no, yeah, I'll share some stuff with you as we get further along.
of course. Well, that's just part one of our conversation. Part two, now we're going to dive into Kurt Pierre's Lost Fantasy, which you're getting to help create and edit along the way. So, for the viewers out there who haven't delved into Lost Fantasy, how can you describe it? Give us a quick pitch in your own words.
Yeah, I just call Lost Fantasy, which is a monthly series of giant-sized issues from Image Comics. I just call it high octane fun comics. It
I'd have
barrels.
to. That's a great description.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I mean it barrels forward. There's no fat. There's every issue's introducing new scenarios or sort of pulling the rug out from under you on what you thought were the established scenarios. I'm super happy with. I officially sort of started working on it more hands-on. I've been talking with Kurt for a while beforehand, but hands-on, I sort of started with what is the first issue of the second volume, which is coming out in April. So
Mm-hmm.
5, and that introduces the character Edge, who I don't want to give anything away, and I think the 7th issue's out already, so maybe I guess the reveal is already out there, but just in case I'm screwing up the timeline and it's not, just in case, well, yeah, but that could have came out early. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah,
Looks
there's
like, yeah, number 7 came out on January 28th, and 8 comes out this month on the 25th.
no, man, I should hire you, you know? Thanks, buddy. But yeah, no, yeah, it's just like I said, high octane, there's no fat. You get and talk about getting your money's worth. It's hard,
Yes.
it's hard, 4, 5, $6 a single issue. And Kurt is giving people giant sized issues every issue. So you're getting a minimum of 40 pages of story, sometimes more.
Love
Um,
that.
yeah, and the price doesn't, the price is what the price is. So, excuse me. So that's been, yeah, that's the monthly angle of it too. The fact that, like, I think that contributes, at least the way Kurt works and thinks and plots, to the barreling forward. What I'm saying, the high octane nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's a blast. It's going to have a couple spin-off books. I know the one Fireborn has already been announced, and I know Kurt is at Comics Pro right now signing with the co-writer Franklin Jonas, who Kurt brought in to co-write with him. So
Fantastic.
Franklin's the youngest of the Jonas brothers, and apparently loved comics and did some interview where he was like, Lost Fantasy is my favorite new book, and what
Oh,
talk about confluence of events once again, a year later or however long it took, here we are. So yeah, Fireborn 1 comes out the same day as Lost Fantasy 9 and the second Lost Fantasy trade. So
dang. Okay.
yeah, that'll be in April. And yeah, there'll be a bunch of stuff in the fall too, but that's probably a little too early to talk about.
That's okay, but that's exciting as a reader. There's a lot of things coming out in the next couple of months that readers can get their hands on. Uh, and on the editing side, like when you jumped in, what drew you into the story, or what felt fresh to you about getting to jump in and kind of steer the story in the right direction?
Well, I'll be honest. Yeah, I don't steer much in this.
That's good.
Yeah, no, Kurt is, Kurt's very confident in where he's taken the storyline. He's, every job I do has different needs, and it's, if I'm not screwing things up, if I'm working the way I should be and I'm at my best, or at least if I'm at capacity, part of it is quickly understanding what those needs are and doing my best to serve those needs. So no, I don't shape the stories at all. I like to think, as the issues go on, hopefully I'm making things better, by a small percentage, but mostly I'm enjoying. I work with the creative team. I help keep things, I help keep the trains running, so to speak. I enjoy kicking things around with Kurt about covers and stuff. I
Hmm.
It's been solicited. We had a lot of fun getting a Tyler Kirkham variant for Fireborn 1.
There you
So
go.
yeah, that's kind of what I enjoy, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, this issue needs to have these kind of variants because that's the plan for that month. It's a whole different thing for me to, put my brain into that and try to figure that stuff out. But yeah, no, in general, I'm just sort of there to be Kurt's, major domo, and try to keep my eyes on stuff. He really works almost all the story stuff out is just through him, and now Franklin as his co-writer on some of the last Lost Fantasy stories, plus the upcoming Fireborn. They kind of work out the stories. I read the scripts, and Kurt's got great artists like Luca Casalanguida, um, Alex Diodo, and Maxi Dallo, who were all involved in some roles, big and small, on the books you just had up there.
Hmm.
And it's a well-oiled machine, man. A lot of the times, it can be hectic just because it's monthly comics and the deadlines are what they are, and
Yeah.
everyone's busy too. Nobody's just, Mark Dale. I'll give Mark Dale, the colorist, and Micah Myers, the letterer. these guys are just, they're war horses. They're
Yeah.
real. They're
Shout
real.
out Micah. He's a industry. I love Micah's work.
Micah Myers is and Mark Dale, the colorist on Lost Fantasy and some of Kurt's other books. These guys are just pros. Sometimes the deadlines get sticky, and there's just nothing you can do about it because it's just, it's making comics. It's not. It can get, sometimes it just flows that way, and
Hmm.
they're terrific. And Image is great as a publisher. I don't have much good to say about most of the publishers I've had to deal with in the last few years, but Image is pretty fantastic from what I see. So there's probably a reason it's like, the mountain to climb for everybody. So
That's
um,
right.
yeah, I'm digging it very much. So it's great stuff. Lost Fantasy, Fireborn, and I think there was probably some announcements today from the Comics Pro stuff, but I don't know, so I don't want to say.
Say that I was going to say. I'm sure, like you mentioned, there's spin-offs and other kind of companion series in the works. But at least on your end of things, what should be readers be excited for in kind of the upcoming arc that is Lost Fantasy, and I guess this next issues that would comprise volume 3 of the trades, I guess.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're building right now to what will be, that's probably no secret. Sorry, I picked up this dinosaur Steve Bissett sent me, and it caught my. But yeah, no, we're building to, a Lost Fantasy Fireborn crossover. And
Excellent.
there's also a new character, Bombshell, who's been on some covers, and Amilcar. Oh, forgive me, Amilcar. I think it's Amilcar Pena, or I hope I'm saying the last part right. But a terrific artist. He did the Ultimates for Marvel, and he's doing a Kurt's Galactic book, and he did a variant for Bombshell. It's, really eye candy and very catching, and so yeah, she's a great new character. I think she's a lot of fun. She's sort of like a sexy female Indiana Jones,
Okay.
and I sometimes like, I don't think there's anything wrong sometimes with just comics being fun, like we don't, don't doesn't need to try to reinvent the wheel or make some point, whether it's intellectual or societal, just tell a kind of a rollicking yarn.
Very much so.
Yeah, so she's kind of a kick-ass like Sigourney Weaver, or fucking date. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. Sorry
No,
about
you're good.
dated reference a bit, I guess, for some folks, but we all know who Sigourney was, but or is. But yeah, no, that's the crossover with Fireborn and the ins and outs of it, and also seeing Patrick Mulholland, the artist of Fireborn. I think he's gonna quickly catch people's attention. He's very inventive storyteller, and he's got the style of the day, and I mean that in the nicest way. It's very slick and engaging, and sort of manga-fied, and
Yes.
in the right places, and yeah. So yeah, just seeing those two series sort of begin to interweave, and then we take a break in August and September. We take a 2-month break, and then in October everything kicks back up, and there'll be like a couple announcements, and probably safe to say a spin-off or two. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And this, I mean, I feel like as a reader, like it's the golden era of like, if you want to find a story on anything that you can think of, there's probably a story out there right now.
100%, man. 100%. I couldn't agree more. It's sort of when I was growing up in the 80s, and I can only imagine it would have been the same for the guys who were older than me, the guys who were growing up, whatever, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever era. Like, I dreamed about this stuff. I was just always into it. And like when you first saw, I don't have it in my, I usually, yeah, like there was a very early Dark Phoenix Saga trade paperback with the Sienkiewicz cover. It was one of the very first Marvel trade paperbacks. And when you saw something like that, or a few years later, it was probably 4 years later, but when you saw the Watchmen Warner Books edition that you could buy
Hmm.
from like one of those back in the day book clubs where it was like, for $1 get 12 books delivered to your house, that type of shit. And it was Watchmen, and like in a hardcover with a dust jacket. And so I dreamed about that. I wrote book reports on that stuff in grade school. Like, I wanted comics to be taken seriously, and like just the fact of seeing them collected 30, 40 years ago,
Hmm.
it's hard to think of now, but back then, just the fact that a comic wouldn't just be like a loose floppy comic, right? That it would be collected into a book or whatever. That in itself was a sign of acceptance and
Yes.
prestige and yeah. So yeah, we're living now in a time where, yeah, any story you could tell any story you want if you tell it the right way, and I think tell it honestly. Yes, it has to engage people and you have to have skill, but you can, it's certainly the medium is open now for so many, forever, and still you still see it by people who are not that bright, I guess, but you still see it like where superheroes used to be the medium. And that's how people thought of it, right?
Hmm.
It was probably, it wasn't a common thought till probably 20 years ago that superheroes were just the genre. Now, folks like us probably would have thought that way, but the
Right.
general person thought of, superheroes are comics, right? So no, it's a beautiful day right now. You can any story you could think of, you could take a shot at.
Absolutely. And this is kind of more on your kind of career and your process of working as a creative person. How do you balance your own writing, editing, and publishing? Does you find that you find yourself kind of fighting all three of those in your headspace, or are you able to kind of dedicate chunks of time to like kind of each mode in a sense?
Yeah, there's a bit of the Book of Job, the biblical Book of Job that I'll probably misquote a tiny bit, but you know, uh, do you want to balance the clouds is the gist of it, and which is an impossibility, right? So I wish I could say. I mean, there's people who are so much put together and have their methods, and they'd probably have no trouble with it. Sometimes it's a rare day that like I could write my own stuff, which I'm in the process of doing, and then it's a rare day that I could do all three things well. In other words, like
Yep.
push Tyrant forward and Lighthouse, handle my freelance work, such as like the Lost Fantasy stuff, and then write my own script. It's usually broken into like today I'm going to do this stuff, and then the next day I'm not going to look at my email until I do this, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a daily balance. I wish it was throughout the course of a day. There's people out there who are, I'm sure they could do it that way, but I sort of do my best to keep up with the flow of what I've got going on. Some days I do, some days I don't. Some days
Hmm.
it's just like anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Actually, uh, for yourself and Lighthouse in particular, do you have any convention appearances planned, even just as a fan, just attending as a fan or tabling?
No, it's as far as like going to cons or like showing up. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
nothing right now. The second Lighthouse book, which will get announced in the summer, might change that equation for me, and maybe I would go somewhere. And then certainly when a book I'm writing called Pretender, which will be the third or fourth Lighthouse book, and it'll come out in 2020. It'll be kickstarted in 2027. Um, Certainly for that, I will do a lot of traveling and stuff. But right now, I'll be very busy with Tyrant and Lighthouse for taking me through to the summer probably. But when the second Lighthouse book is announced, that might change. That might change.
Excellent. Yeah, that basically answered my next question. Is kind of what, at least what you can talk about in terms of other projects that you're working on in the rest of this year.
The second Lighthouse book is going to be with Paul Pope,
Oh, it's fantastic.
and Jim Rugg is going to join us as well for that and serve in the same role as book designer and work on everything with us. So yeah, I can't say what it is exactly, but we're working on it. Yeah, we're working on it and have been for a while. Me and Paul, Jim is focused on Tyrant, and then Jim's also with V Friends, which is a very up and coming. I mean, to call a guy who's a billionaire an up and comer is probably hasn't been called that in a million years, but it's the social media maverick Gary Vaynerchuk and V Friends Comics, and
Yes.
Jim is involved. He writes and draws a book, and I think he writes two other books, and So Jim's got that stuff going on as well. But yeah, when we announce what the project is with Paul, yeah, I could see doing some kind of traveling for that, just to, maybe a promo event, but yeah, that, and I'm just trying to think if there's something else that I should talk about that someone will feel insulted if I don't. Um, I did just sign on. I don't have to talk about it now because I think he's going to do all the promo stuff soon. But I did just sign on with a young, very successful young comic producer. I'm going to handle some licensed properties for him, a couple video games, and sort of a old school fan favorite, femme fatale, who has had a couple movies and stuff. I don't think I should say what it is yet, but yeah, like, so it'll be new for me. Just like working with Kurt on monthly deadlines has been new to me. Working on sort of like the video games, pretty popular game. One of these, tens of millions of copies or whatever. So that'll, yeah, we're just getting started on that. But I'm just trying to think. Tyrant is really it for now. Lost Fantasy. Oh, geez, I almost forgot. So much going on, but we do have and I'll send you this too. I should have sent it to you, but with Kurt Piers, Kurt's doing his first Kickstarter, which was announced, called The Objectivist.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so the J Lee cover has been revealed. One of we might have multiple J Lee covers, but that's been one of them's been revealed, and I think the first set of pages was revealed. So yeah, that also, it's like just been so hectic. Like I said, Kurt's traveling right now to Comix Pro, and
Yep.
I've got this Tyrant stuff going on. But the Objectivist is something we'll be banging the drum a lot more on in a couple weeks. So that Tyrant, Lost Fantasy stuff, and yeah, the Pope book will be. I'm looking. It's one that in a lot of ways I've thought of longer than Tyrant. So it's like very much a dream come true to do it with Paul.
Yes.
And yeah, I'll look
Love
forward.
that.
We'll talk about that maybe in May or June or something.
Perfect. So, Chris, where can people find out what Lighthouse has going on, and where can they follow along online?
Oh, thanks, pal. Yeah, it's Instagram, Comix Lighthouse. Same thing on Facebook. And that's about it for right now. We'll look into setting up some other stuff. Twitter, I don't even know if I'd want to be on Twitter, but I can't even get the thing that's like I could get water out of rocks before I'd be able to figure it out, buddy. So yeah, we have a TikTok set up, and the plan for that went to hell. I have Blue Sky set up. Nobody messages me on Blue Sky. If you want to message me on Blue Sky, I will warmly receive it and reply as quickly as possible. But yeah,
Yes.
Instagram, Comics Lighthouse on Instagram, Comics Lighthouse on Facebook, and if anybody has any questions or any thoughts on anything they want to share, they could certainly DM me on Facebook or Instagram, and I try to reply to anybody who reaches out. So yeah, that's about it, man.
That's great to know. A lot of people, I feel like the DMs feel kind of scare people away a lot of the time, but most of the time, most people, I think, comics creators are more than likely to reply to those messages.
Yeah, as long as it's in bounds, as long as
Exactly.
it's nothing crazy. And yeah, I mean, I hate to be a shill here, but obviously I want folks to hopefully go to the Tyrant Kickstarter pre-launch page and
Yep.
follow and share it if they can. So that's kind of my main, that's you know, Tyrant pre-launch page. That's the home of Chris Stevens and Lighthouse.
And that's right. And honestly, I put it in the chat, and it's also going to be in the description of the video once we post it on YouTube as well. So, Chris, my last question is an odd one, and you've already answered it once, but I still wanted to see what your answer to it is. What's your favorite snack or meal as a go-to when you need to sit down and power yourself through a couple hours?
Yeah, we did do this, didn't we? I be honest with you. I wish I could come up with something entertaining, but it's very boring, and I guess it'll seem goofy, but like I peck away at like handfuls of dry cereal, and
There
I
you go.
I have like, 6 to 8 different kinds of cereal, and I eat like a squirrel, little dry handfuls of cereal. I've got some health issues, and I don't really like stuff myself the way that the way that maybe you did back in the day or whatnot. So yeah, kind of that. I drink. You probably see me with these thermoses. I drink a lot of hot tea, and
Yes.
increasingly I drink probably too much coffee. So yeah, that's it about cereal. Different cereals. Golden grams. That's a good one.
Yeah. I love Golden Grams too. So
Golden
good,
grams.
great choice.
Yeah, yeah, man.
All right, Chris. Well, this has been a great conversation. Great to have you on again. I'm sure we'll have you on again, with the upcoming projects. So everybody out there, make sure to check out the Kickstarter pre-launch page for Tyrant. Like I said too, it's going to be in the description when we post it on YouTube. But Chris, any last thoughts before we head out?
Just super super blessed to be doing this with Steve and Jim on Stephen R. Bissett's Tyrant, and a few weeks away from the Kickstarter, and just always appreciative when someone like yourself, who's such a great champion of comics, takes time out of their day and their life to help me spread the Tyrant gospel. So it's a pleasure to come on and chat with you. And thanks for talking about the Lost Fantasy work as well. And I'm
Of
glad you're
course.
doing well. And I am certain we will do this again.
Absolutely. Thanks for the kind words, Chris. I very appreciate it very much. So everybody, we've had at least 3 or 4 people live watching us. We got a chat or a YouTube comment from Devin saying, hey, he's following the campaign. So I'm pretty sure it's Devin Whitlock. Devin, shout out to you out there. But this has been Comics for All, where comics, creativity, and
Thanks,
community all
Devin.
connect. And everybody, take care.